She wasn't supposed to be late. He wasn't supposed to notice her. But the moment their eyes met, the world stopped for both of them. And what began as a wedding turned into a love story no one saw coming. The rain came down in steady sheets, tapping against car windows and rooftops like a drumbeat counting down to disaster. Clara Reyes, dressed in lavender satin and clutching a bouquet of wildflowers, stood helplessly at the edge of a gas station parking lot, staring at the lifeless shell of her grandmother's old station wagon, the same one that had gotten her through college, to job interviews and countless errands. It had finally quit on the one day it simply couldn't. No, not now, she murmured, banging her palm against the steering wheel. Her hair, carefully curled just an hour ago, was already starting to frizz from the damp air, and her perfectly applied eyeliner threatened to betray her composure. Clara was supposed to be at the Evergrande estate, a lavish, hilltop venue overlooking the coast, standing beside her best friend Harper as maid of honor. She had the speech in her purse, the rings tucked safely in a velvet pouch, and a heart full of joy for the woman who'd stuck by her through everything. But instead, she was stranded 22 miles away, holding onto hope and a flickering phone battery. She dialed the only number she could think of. "Hi, yes, I need a cab as soon as possible. To Evergrande Estate, please, it's urgent. I'm in the wedding." 20 minutes later, a dented yellow cab screeched into the lot, and Clara, bouquet in hand, climbed in with the grace of a woman, running on panic. By the time she arrived at the estate, the ceremony had already begun. The grand hall was wrapped in twinkling lights, with music drifting softly through the open doors. Clara's shoes clicked on the marble floor as she tried to glide rather than run, her dress clinging awkwardly to her damp legs. A few guests turned to glance at her, their curiosity barely veiled behind polite expressions. But one pair of eyes didn't just glance. Elliot Maddox, billionaire entrepreneur, founder of one of the world's fastest-growing tech startups, and the groom's oldest friend, was adjusting his cufflinks near the back of the hall. He had no intention of being distracted from the vows until he saw her. She wasn't walking in like she belonged, she was rushing in like she was late to the rest of her life. There was something about her, not just the obvious beauty, though Clara was undeniably striking, even in her disheveled state. It was the urgency in her steps, the sincerity in her flustered expression. She didn't know she was being watched, and that made it all the more real. Elliot had always prided himself on being composed, reserved, distant, even. But something in him shifted as he watched her straighten her posture, fix her necklace, and press her palm to her chest as if trying to slow her racing heart before entering the hall. He didn't even know her name, but in that moment, something in his soul leaned forward. Clara finally slipped into the bridesmaid lineup, trying to act like she'd been there all along. Harper gave her a subtle, knowing smile, half relief, half "we're going to talk about this later," but it was okay. She had made it. As the ceremony unfolded, Clara finally allowed herself to breathe. The vows were beautiful, the setting, like something out of a dream. But even as she tried to stay present, she felt something odd, like someone was watching her. She scanned the room discreetly, and that's when her eyes locked with his. Tall, striking, a tux that fit like it had been tailored just for that moment, and eyes that didn't look away when she caught him staring. She quickly turned her attention back to the altar, cheeks flushing. Elliot, on the other hand, wasn't embarrassed. He was intrigued. Who was this girl? Later, during the reception, Clara tried to hide in the crowd, hoping to make herself useful rather than make small talk. She'd always been more of a helper than a center of attention type. While everyone else danced or posed for photos, she made sure the bride had water, the cake wasn't melting, and the elderly guests had someone to talk to. But fate wasn't done with her yet. As she turned from the drink table, her heel caught on the edge of the dance floor. The world tipped slightly, and before she could fall, a strong hand caught her arm. "You all right?" a deep voice asked. She looked up straight into his eyes. "Yes. Thank you," she said quickly, brushing imaginary dust off her dress. "I don't usually catch falling bridesmaids, but I'm glad I was in the right place," he said with a soft smile. "Elliot, Clara." They shook hands, hers slightly damp from holding a cold glass, his firm and warm. He didn't let go immediately, and neither did she. They ended up talking for almost an hour. Not about work, or fame, or money. He didn't bring up his company once. Instead, they spoke about childhood memories, favorite books, embarrassing high school stories. Clara made him laugh, real laughter, the kind that surprised him. She didn't seem fazed by his status, didn't flirt to impress. She was genuine. That was rare in his world. Clara, on the other hand, had no idea who he really was. She only knew that he was kind, attentive, and unexpectedly charming. She liked the way he listened, not with the intent to reply, but to understand. When the bride came over and found them deep in conversation, she raised a teasing eyebrow. "So this is where you disappeared to?" "Just making friends," Clara said, blushing. Harper grinned. "Right? Just don't let my husband see he's been trying to get Elliot to smile all year." As the evening wore on, Elliot found himself watching Clara more than he should have. Every time she laughed, his chest ached in a way he couldn't explain. He'd spent years building empires, buying penthouses, acquiring companies, but nothing he owned compared to the way it felt watching Clara dance barefoot on the lawn, with a group of kids from the bride's extended family, spinning and twirling like joy itself. He realized then this wasn't just a crush. Something in his world had shifted, and it started the moment a late bridesmaid stumbled into the ceremony with wild hair and eyes that saw right through him. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains, casting a soft golden hue across the Evergrande Estate's guest suite. Clara stirred awake to the sound of birdsong, her eyes adjusting slowly to the unfamiliar luxury that surrounded her. Silk sheets, ivory walls, a room too elegant for someone who still lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment above a florist shop. For a moment, she forgot where she was until the events of the night before came rushing back. The wedding, the ceremony she nearly missed, the awkward entrance, the laughter, the dance, and him, Elliot. Her heart thumped quietly at the thought of him, not because he was handsome, though he certainly was, but because of the way he looked at her. Like she wasn't just another face in a crowd. Like she mattered. Clara sat up slowly, brushing curls out of her face. Her dress from last night hung carefully over the arm of a velvet chair, and beside it, someone had left a single pink peony in a glass of water. Her breath caught. Peonies were her favorite. There was no note, just the flower. She smiled to herself, unsure what it meant but hoping. Downstairs, the estate bustled with post-wedding cleanup. Staff moved with silent efficiency, clearing champagne, flutes, and disassembling centerpieces. Clara made her way through the hall, trying not to feel out of place among the guests checking out, laughing about last night's festivities. She wasn't anyone special here, just a bridesmaid, just a florist, really. But to Elliot, she had been something more, or had she imagined that? She found herself wandering toward the garden terrace, half hoping she might run into him. But the space was quiet, save for a gardener trimming roses along the path. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Of course he'd already left. Men like him didn't linger, especially not for girls who arrived late in wrinkled dresses. Just as she turned to leave, a familiar voice stopped her. "Looking for someone?" Her heart jumped. She turned, and there he was, dressed in dark jeans and a casual button-down. Sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair slightly tousled from the breeze. Less polished than last night, more real. "I thought you might have left already," she said, trying to steady her voice. "I was going to, but then I thought, what if I missed the chance to see you again?" Clara blinked. "Me?" "Yes, you." He took a few steps closer, the late morning light catching his eyes. "Clara, last night was unexpected. I don't usually talk that much at weddings, or at all." She laughed softly. "So I'm the one who broke the silence." "You did more than that." For a moment, the air between them held something fragile, not tension, but possibility, like the first few notes of a song neither of them had heard yet, but somehow knew the words too. "I was thinking," he continued, "I have a meeting in town later today, but it's not urgent, and there's this coffee shop by the harbor, quiet, tucked away. Would you want to go, just for a bit?" Clara hesitated. It had been years since someone asked her out without playing games, without pretending, but something about Elliot's invitation didn't feel like a line. It felt like a door, "I'd like that," she said quietly. His smile was genuine, no trace of arrogance. "Good. How about we meet in an hour? I'll wait outside the gates." They parted with a soft goodbye, Clara's heart fluttering as she returned to her room. She changed into something simple, a soft sundress, sandals, hair half up, and tried not to overthink. But her thoughts betrayed her. Why her? He could be with anyone. But then she remembered how he looked at her last night, not like someone admiring a prize, but like someone discovering something he didn't know he needed. Outside, Elliot waited just as promised. His car, sleek but not flashy, idled along the gravel path. He stepped out to open her door, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Their drive was filled with comfortable conversation, stories about their childhoods, favorite ice cream flavors, shared love for rainy afternoons. Clara found herself laughing more in that 30-minute ride than she had in weeks. When they reached the Harbor Cafe, nestled between a lighthouse and a string of antique shops, it felt like stepping into another world. Warm pastries, coffee steamed in white ceramic mugs, a view of the water that stretched for miles. And then, in the midst of their laughter and stories, Clara asked something that had been quietly gnawing at her. "So what do you do, Elliot?" He paused. Most people asked that first. It always changed how they looked at him. "I build things," he said finally, "mostly tech companies. Some investments. I run a firm." She tilted her head. "A small firm?" "Not exactly." He watched her closely, waiting for the shift, the wide eyes, the change in tone. But Clara simply nodded, sipping her coffee. "Do you like it?" He was thrown off by the question. "Like the work?" "Yeah. Does it make you happy?" Elliot stared at her for a long moment. "No one's ever asked me that," he admitted. "And honestly, not always, but last night, that made me happy." Her eyes softened. "Me too." And right then, under a sky that had finally cleared of clouds, Elliot realized something that would stay with him long after this day ended. He wasn't looking for someone to fit into his world. He had just found someone who made him want to build a new one. Would she let him? That answer was still ahead. But one thing was certain: Clara Reyes, the late bridesmaid who almost didn't make it, was about to become the most unforgettable part of his story. And maybe, just maybe, he was about to become hers. The next few days passed like a dream Clara wasn't ready to wake up from. It wasn't just that Elliot called her every morning, or that he sent messages that weren't just words, but small windows into his world, his thoughts, his fears, his hopes. It was the way he remembered things she barely said. Her love for cinnamon tea, her tendency to hum while folding laundry, the way her voice softened when she talked about her late grandmother. Most men Clara had met wore their intentions too boldly or hid them entirely. But Elliot didn't hide or push. He just showed up, again and again, as if choosing her wasn't a decision he had to think about. It was simply what felt right. Still, beneath Clara's smile, a quiet storm brewed, because there was something she hadn't told him, something she wasn't sure how to explain. She didn't come from the kind of world Elliot did. While he attended galas and built companies, she'd spent most of her life helping her mother pay rent, skipping college to work at the local florist, and using every spare dollar to keep their tiny apartment from falling apart. And now her mother's health was getting worse. Clara hadn't shared this with anyone at the wedding, not Harper, not even her closest co-workers. She didn't want pity, and she certainly didn't want Elliot to see her life as a burden. But secrets, no matter how gently we try to hold them, always find their way to the surface. It happened on a Tuesday. Elliot had invited her to a late lunch on the rooftop of a quiet restaurant overlooking the city skyline. Everything was perfect: sunset on the horizon, soft music in the background, and that same light in his eyes whenever he looked at her. But just as Clara reached for her glass of water, her phone buzzed on the table. Once, twice, then 3 times. In rapid succession, she picked it up instinctively, heart sinking when she saw the caller ID. St. Catherine's Medical Center, she answered quietly, turning slightly away from Elliot, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hello, Miss Reyes? This is Nurse Simone from the cardiology department. We've been trying to reach you regarding your mother. Her tests came back, and Dr. Levin would like to see you as soon as possible." Clara's grip on the phone tightened. Is it serious? The pause on the other end was long enough to say everything. We think it's best if you come in. She ended the call slowly, her smile gone. Her appetite vanished. She felt the world around her begin to dim, as though someone had pulled a curtain between her and everything bright. Elliot noticed instantly. Clara, he asked gently. Is everything okay? She hesitated, caught between honesty and the instinct to protect him from her reality. It's just, something came up. I'm sorry. I have to go. I'll take you. No, it's fine. I'll call a cab. Clara, he said, standing now, his eyes searching hers. Talk to me. And for a moment, she almost did. She almost told him about her mother's long history of heart issues, about the hospital visits, the insurance struggles, the quiet panic she'd lived with for years. But the words wouldn't come. Some things are better left alone, she said instead, forcing a smile. I'll call you later, okay? She left him standing there, unsure of what had just broken between them, but certain something had. That night, Clara sat beside her mother's hospital bed, holding her hand as machines beeped softly in the background. Mrs. Reyes was awake, her voice weak but warm. Did you go to that fancy wedding? She asked, her eyes twinkling. Clara smiled through the exhaustion. I did. Meet anyone special? She hesitated, her heart aching. Maybe. Her mother squeezed her hand. Don't be afraid to let someone in, Mija, even when you think they won't understand. Clara nodded, brushing away a tear. But inside, she wasn't sure Elliot would want to know this side of her life. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't from wealth. She didn't have a perfect past or a flawless future. She had hospital bills. She had fear. And now, she had silence. Because the next day came, then the one after that. And Elliot didn't call. She didn't know it yet, but Elliot hadn't forgotten her. In fact, he'd driven past her flower shop twice, parked a block away, unsure if he should go in. He hadn't called, not because he didn't care, but because he'd seen her leave that rooftop looking like her world was falling apart, and he didn't know how to step into someone else's pain without breaking more things along the way. Until the florist's front door jingled open 2 days later. Clara turned from the counter, a soft apology already on her lips, ready to tell the customer they were closing early. But it wasn't a customer. It was him. Elliot stood there, holding a paper bag and a bundle of tulips, pink ones, just like the peony he left behind. I didn't know what to bring, he said quietly. So I brought dinner, and flowers, and maybe a few apologies. Clara stared at him, her eyes already brimming with unshed tears. I didn't mean to disappear. He continued. I didn't want to barge into your life like I could fix it. I didn't want to make you feel like I needed to be your hero. I don't need a hero. She whispered. I know, that's why I'm here. He stepped forward, setting the bag on the counter. I just want to sit beside you, even if it's just for a little while, even if we say nothing. Clara looked at him then, not the suit, not the status, not the money, but the man who saw her when no one else did. And for the first time in a long time, she let someone in. Not because she needed saving, but because maybe, just maybe, he did too. And neither of them was ready to admit that this, whatever it was already changing everything. The morning Clara woke up to find her face in the news, everything she feared came true. It started with a single message from Harper. I'm so sorry, don't open anything online right now. Clara's stomach dropped. Her fingers trembled as she typed her own name into the search bar, hoping, praying it wasn't what she thought. But it was. There, on every gossip blog and social feed, were photos of her and Elliot, at the wedding, at the rooftop cafe, even outside her flower shop 2 nights ago, where he'd brought her dinner and tulips. The headlines were loud, ruthless, and full of assumptions. Billionaire Elliot Maddox spotted cozy with unknown florist after best friend's wedding. Mystery bridesmaid caught the eye of tech tycoon. Who is she? From bouquets to billionaire? Meet the woman rumored to have stolen Elliot Maddox's heart. They had her name, her shop, even an old picture from her high school yearbook. She felt like the air had been punched out of her lungs. Clara didn't care about fame. She had built her life quietly, piece by piece, with dignity and grace. And now the world had torn through it like it was gossip fuel. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Strangers were leaving reviews on her shop's page, some kind, many cruel. One woman accused her of being a gold digger. Another called her just another social climber. But what hurt the most were the doubts clawing at her from within. Was this the price of falling for someone like Elliot? Was she ever going to be enough? She didn't answer calls that morning, not even Harper's, not even his, because somewhere, deep down, a voice she thought she'd silenced had come roaring back. People like you don't belong in worlds like his. That voice grew louder when she saw the news truck parked 2 blocks down, and when the customers came in not to buy flowers, but to take selfies and whisper about her behind their hands. Clara locked the front door of the shop and pulled down the shade. She sat on the floor behind the counter, hugging her knees to her chest. And that's where Elliot found her. He didn't knock. He used the spare key she'd given him the night before, the smallest gesture of trust she could offer at the time, thinking they'd just share a meal and a laugh, thinking things could still be quiet between them. He stepped inside, carrying nothing this time. No flowers, no gifts, just himself. "Clara," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Talk to me." She shook her head. "They know everything." "They know nothing," he said firmly. "They know pieces of you. Pieces they've twisted into something cheap and untrue." Clara looked up, her eyes shining with a question she hadn't dared ask. "Why didn't you stop them? You have power, connections. Couldn't you have stopped this?" He exhaled. "I tried. I made calls the second I saw it. But sometimes, the more I push, the more they dig. It's like feeding a fire." She laughed bitterly. "So what am I supposed to do? Just let the world tear apart my life, my shop, my reputation?" "No," he said gently. "You're supposed to live anyway, to rise anyway, to let this moment prove what they can never understand, your strength." She stared at him, stunned. "I've lived with attention my whole life," he added, "but I've never seen anyone handle it with the quiet strength you do. You didn't ask for this, Clara, but I'm standing here because I believe you're not just strong enough to face it, you're strong enough to overcome it." Clara wanted to believe him. She did. But belief is hard when the world feels like it's watching you fall. Later that evening, Harper came by the shop with 2 cups of tea and the full story. Turns out, someone at the wedding had leaked the photos, a distant cousin, hoping for a quick paycheck from the tabloids. "I'm so sorry," Harper said, squeezing Clara's hand. "I never thought something like this could happen." Clara nodded, too tired to feel anger anymore. But when Harper left, and Clara stood alone by the window, something inside her shifted. She'd spent her whole life being the girl who didn't cause trouble, the girl who stayed quiet, who worked hard, loved deeply, and never asked for more than she was given. But maybe it was time to ask. That night, she called Elliot. When he picked up, she didn't waste a second. "I want to tell my side," she said. "On my terms." He was silent for a moment. Then, "Are you sure?" "I'm not doing it to defend myself," she said. "I'm doing it so they don't get to write my story for me." He smiled softly. "Then I'll stand beside you." The next day, she sat down with a small, reputable journalist, someone Elliot trusted. No cameras, just a voice recorder and real questions. She told them about the wedding, about being late, about Elliot noticing her not because she tried to be seen, but because he looked deeper. She spoke about her mother's illness, her flower shop, her fears, and most of all, her refusal to be defined by anyone else's assumptions. When the article went live 3 days later, it didn't trend like wildfire, but the people who read it felt something. They shared it quietly. One comment said, "I see myself in her. She's real." Another read, "She didn't climb to the top. She built something from the ground and still stands." The cruel voices faded, not because they were silenced, but because the truth was stronger. That night, Clara returned to the rooftop cafe with Elliot. Same place, different feeling. "I don't know what's going to happen next," she told him. "Watching the city lights flicker." "Me neither," he said. "But I know I don't want it to happen without you." She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, let herself believe in something bigger than fear. Not because the world had changed, but because she had. Asterisk the letter came. On a Thursday morning. No warning. No expectations. Just a white envelope. Slipped through the door of Clara's flower shop while she was in the back, rearranging a bouquet of sunflowers. At first, she thought it was another wedding invitation, or maybe another apology card from some well-meaning stranger who had read her story and wanted to say they admired her courage. But this wasn't that. It was an offer. And not just any offer. Clara stood in the quiet of her shop, rereading the letter 3 times, her fingers trembling slightly as each line sunk deeper into her reality. The message was simple, but surreal. We're deeply moved by your story. Your resilience, honesty, and authenticity reflect everything we stand for. We would be honored to invite you to lead the floral design team for our upcoming international event tour. Full travel, compensation, and creative control included. Let's take your gift to the world. Signed by the creative director of Elena Solene, one of the most prestigious lifestyle brands in Europe. Clara dropped into the chair behind the register, heart racing. This couldn't be real. A week ago, she was sweeping petals off the shop floor, trying to keep her mother's hospital bills paid, praying for a quiet life free from chaos. And now, the very chaos that almost shattered her was giving her a once-in-a-lifetime door to something far beyond anything she imagined. But the moment the thrill set in, so did the fear. The tour would be 6 months, across cities she'd only read about. Paris, Milan, Vienna, Tokyo. It would mean leaving the shop, leaving her mother, at least temporarily, and leaving Elliot, the man who had held her hand through the storm without ever asking for anything in return. The man who had never once treated her like she was less. The man who, if she was being honest with herself, had started to mean more to her than she could fully admit. She didn't want to run from this opportunity, but she also didn't want to lose the one thing in her life that had felt real. Before the world started watching, she didn't tell him right away. Instead, she carried the weight of the decision in her pocket, folded and quiet, waiting for the right moment. That night, Elliot showed up at her apartment with 2 steaming takeout bags and a tired but happy smile. He'd had a long day, meetings, press calls, and a board presentation, but when Clara opened the door, all of it melted off his face. They ate on the floor, surrounded by the hum of her tiny apartment, candles flickering gently on the coffee table. It was quiet, safe. And yet, Clara's heart beat a little too fast. She couldn't hold it any longer. I got something today, she said softly. Setting down her chopsticks, Elliot looked up, curiosity already forming between his brows. What kind of something? She handed him the letter. He read it in silence. The flicker in his eyes was immediate. Surprise, then pride, then something she couldn't quite read. When he looked up, he smiled, but there was a hesitation behind it. Clara, this is amazing, he said slowly. It is. You should do it. She searched his face. Just like that. He leaned forward, his voice steady. Do you know what I thought when I first saw you at that wedding? I thought, there's a woman who walks through storms and doesn't let anyone see her wet. And then I got to know you, and I realized I was wrong. Clara's breath caught. Wrong how? You do let people see, but only when it matters, only when you choose them. That takes more strength than pretending you're okay all the time. She looked away, tears threatening her balance. I want you to go, he continued. Not because I want you far away, but because I believe in you. You're meant for more than just this shop. You're meant to show the world what someone with nothing but heart and talent can become. But what about us? She asked, the question coming out raw and vulnerable. He didn't hesitate. We'll figure it out. How? Her voice cracked. 6 months, long distance, different countries. He reached for her hand. Love doesn't ask for perfect conditions. It asks for effort, and honesty, and courage. If we have that, we'll make it. Clara nodded slowly, tears now falling freely, not from sadness but from the staggering relief of being seen, chosen, and believed in. But still, the fear didn't vanish. She couldn't shake the feeling that something this beautiful wasn't meant to last, that the world had already taken so much from her. What if this was the next cost? The next few days moved fast. She met with Elena Solene's team, signed contracts, cried with her mother, who insisted she go and promised to stay strong. Harper threw her a surprise farewell gathering, full of lavender petals and candles that smelled like home. And then, just like that, it was the night before her flight. Clara stood alone on the rooftop where it all began, watching the stars blur against the city lights. She didn't know why she'd come here, except that it felt like the last place she was still herself before everything changed. A soft voice broke the silence behind her. Couldn't let you say goodbye to the city without me. She turned. Elliot. He walked up beside her, pulling something from his pocket. A necklace, silver, simple, with a tiny pressed flower encased in glass. A daisy, her favorite. Something to remind you, he said quietly, that no matter how far you go, I'll still be here. She clutched the necklace to her chest. I don't want to leave you, she whispered. You're not, he replied. You're just walking forward, and I'll be right here, cheering for you. They stood there, wrapped in silence, hearts fuller than they knew what to do with. Neither of them said the word goodbye, because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something even more powerful than staying.